Well, hello, everybody. Thank you all for joining us. My name's Cindy Peister, and I'm with UUJEC's Peace, Equity, and Climate Task Force. It's so lovely to see all of you here. And we have a very special guest today, Rachel Bruhnke, who is going to speak to us on the Cold War Truth Commission and how she came to question the Cold War. Rachel has an incredible history of activism. She's got three special notations in the chat that you might want to refer to with links to the original commission when it was introduced, and also others, including a link to Code Pink on Cuba, which she wants you to check out, and also a link on her book. So Rachel is a UU. It's not very often we get a speaker in that's an actual UU. And Rachel has been a member of the Pacific Unitarian Church in Palos Verdes since 2005. She's an area high school teacher. She earned her MS in environmental resource engineering from CSU Humboldt. And she was researching the energy transition of Cuba after the breakup of the Socialist trading bloc led by the Soviet Union. So she's very steeped in what she's going to present to us today. She received her BA in political science with an emphasis on Latin American affairs from CSU Long Beach during the Reagan years and against Central America. And she studied at LA Catolica University in Lima, Peru, traveling extensively in the Southern Cone during the post-Dirty War area. She's lived in Honduras as a Peace Corps volunteer and later specialized in developmental exchange work in Ecuador and Costa Rica. She's traveled to Cuba for more than 25 years for work and studies, and marvels at the Cuban people's achievements in human and environmental sustainability. After the demise of Bernie Sanders' campaign in the first election of Donald Trump, Rachel founded the Cold War Truth Commission, a project to help other Americans understand the seminal role that the United States global war against communism has had in creating conflict and misery abroad and at home. Her recent book, by the same name, the compilation is a compilation of 60 testimonies putting the U.S. Cold War on trial. It's a project that Oliver Stone lauded as called ideologically right on. Rachel lives with her daughter and partner at Harbor Farms, an urban farm, excuse me, that they created in San Pedro. So we're so glad to have you, Rachel. Take it away.
Okay. Well, thank you. I just want to say thank you so much. It's great to be among UUs also on the other end, because the answer is deeply spiritual. The problems are deeply spiritual. And I have been even though I've been a UU for about a little over 20 years, I've been a pretty reverent person all my life, never attached to any religion, but really cared a lot. And I grew up in the Reagan era when I was told as a young person, and you all also remember this, that we were bleeding hearts. Remember that phrase? We were bleeding hearts if we cared for the people of Central America. And so a lot of my background in my childhood and then my youth growing up was just being told that what I felt inside of me wasn't real and was to be mocked. And so I'm going to start my slideshow right now. And this is actually a talk that I gave at our wonderful church. So let's see. I gave at our wonderful church about 4 years ago. We had a minister who was there for a little while. She was an interim minister. And her name was Chloe, and she allowed me to give this talk from the pulpit. So can everyone see? Okay.
Yep.
So I was very glad to be able to be in a church that would allow me to give this talk, and I just want to say that if there's any other occasion with any other place that you all know of that I could give this talk, I would love to also. It's on the Cold War, but it is literally how I came to question the Cold War and my thinking about it. So I am not saying that this is comprehensive, and I'm not either saying that other people can't share their ideas and have ideas. As a matter of fact, we have a lot of time today, so I'm going to go through this in a talk, and I hope it spurs a lot of conversation, and more importantly, even than conversation and education, but action. So I want to organize with you all today. Okay, so these are beautiful principles, and this is who I am. And when I came to church first, I signed up right away, and the minister said, it was John Morehouse at the time. He said, no, shop around, don't sign up your first day. I said, no, there's nowhere else for me. This is it or nothing. So I came from no church to UU. So very happy to do it. I want to say right now, and thank you, it is in the chat. There is a link to Code Pink's page on Cuba, and Cuba is in crisis, not of their own making. This is a man-made, US-made, capitalist-made crisis. And please, everybody who can, click on that link. It will give you further information, and it will also link you to how to donate. There are a couple of very important and exciting and unfortunate that we have to do this, but there is going to be a flotilla to Cuba, just like there was to Gaza. And bless everybody doing that. So you can find out more information from Code Pink and probably World Beyond War. I see someone from World Beyond War is here. Awesome. So please check that out. My background in Cuba was looking at after the breakup of the Soviet Union and their energy crunch. What did they do when they didn't have the energy coming in, the oil coming in from the Soviet Union? And so I looked at the solarization of their mostly rural economy, and pretty amazing. I'm going to give a whole nother talk on Cuba. I have a whole other slideshow that I want to do on this beautiful, beautiful country. But I just want to say, because for many of us, and myself definitely, Cuba is on our minds a lot and in our hearts a lot. And it is hard to go through a day without shedding a tear right now, without really feeling for my family that I have in Cuba, my dear friends, and the dear example that this country has been to all of us. But know that they are strong, they are resilient, they are creative, and they have the whole world as their allies. Whereas we know we have, as Daniel Ortega of Nicaragua said, we have no friends. America has no friends in the world. Cuba is friends with everybody. So we're all going to get through this, help them get through this together. So when I first went to Cuba, I got so angry because I had spent 30 years not knowing about Cuba, being lied to about Cuba. And when I went to Cuba, I said, wait a second, we have had a crushing campaign against them to keep them from being like the rest of Latin America. And Cuba's beautiful and amazing. And so I kind of immediately understood all of the hemisphere that I had lived in and traveled in, like you heard in my bio, in a big Cold War kind of perspective. And it really made me debunk, in my mind, the entire Cold War. So I started to put on these things called Cold War Truth Commissions. This is 10 years ago. And bravely, we all said at these truth commissions, you know what? So what if I'm a fellow traveler? EK, which means, and what of it? And I think today we need to not shy from any word. We need to not shy from socialism. We need to not shy from communism. We need to not shy, from peace, and move on. So what I did was, we're doing these truth commissions, and then We did a 9-hour webinar, and the link to that webinar is on in the chat right now. We're going to put it on at the end of the talk also. And that 9-hour webinar had almost 60 testimonies in it. And the testimonies are in this book that I had published just a few months ago. And we've been going around California and selling it and talking about it and doing it's not just book sales. Everywhere we go, we do truth commissions. And so we talk about what's in the book. We bring people who are in the book there, and then we go into action around it. So I say that what we do is we push back HUAC. If the House Un-American activities could come in and threaten and terrify, Americans around the country for 10 years or so back in the 50s and 60s, we can certainly go around and push back all of those lies and cruelty that has been bestowed upon our country. So please check out the book. You're also supporting a Black, Afro-centered, Black-centered bookstore in Los Angeles in Leimert Park when you do. So the evil of the Cold War, the militarism of our country, the lies that we have been told, and the millions of mostly men, I'll say women too, mostly men who have been bamboozled into joining the military for our empire around the world ended up here on January 6th. This is the top of the Capitol building. It's a little hard to see on this screen, but this is the only sign that made it to the top of the Capitol building that day. And it says, the real invisible enemy is communism. So what's going on in our world today, in our country today, is the continuation of the Cold War that was never cold and never ended. It is an anti-communist crusade, and they are out to basically crush and kill anything that they consider communism in nature, down to the idea that even all of us having health care is somehow communist. All of us having homes is somehow communist. All of us having education is somehow communist. And they have been trained in violence. So this is a picture of my dad. And my dad was in the army in World War II, and he was stationed at Berchtesgadens, which was Hitler's mountain lair. And he was stationed there right after the war. And his job was, I call him a Nazi hunter. His job was to determine whether these Germans were Nazis, sympathizers, or whether they were like German refugees. And so I got a lot of earful all my life about the stories. He was definitely anti-fascist. And so he raised me on understanding what a fascist heart is. And my belief is that, we all have fascism inside of us. That's human. But we also have communism inside of us. That's also another side of human nature. And so what kind of society are we going to structure around us that makes the best of who human beings can be and not the worst? So how is it that we became more afraid of European-style socialism than European-style fascism? How is it that this godless communism, my dad would always say, he said, Rachel, always remember, the word in the 1950s was not communism. He said it was godless communism. And many of you kind of, remember those days more. I'm looking forward to hearing your stories. He said it was godless communism. It was one word, and they put the fear, and they basically made everything about this idea the devil. And so how is it that we went in the 1930s and 40s from FDR and his second Bill of Rights, which was almost law of the land, and it was certainly popular, and he was certainly an incredibly popular president, unpopular in many ways, and we're actually still crushing FDR. That's what we've been doing for many decades now, is crushing the advances made in the 30s and the 40s. And so how did we go from this idea of an America to now an America where we can't even have Bernie Sanders as our candidate? And so this is a famous Edward R. Murrow quote that says, if you're not confused, you don't really understand the situation. So people who think they know everything, think they got it all figured out, aren't understanding how complex. So how is it that we went from being allies with the Soviet Union and almost having these new economic New Deal to where we are today? And the only answer is the Cold War. That's been the overarching paradigm of the last 75 years. Edward R. Murrow, famous for, I think he was First World War I, or was he just World War II? I forget, sorry. But, ended up getting fired from CBS. Great movie. Good. Everyone want to mute, maybe? Everyone muting? Thank you. Great movie, Good Night and Good Luck. Please see it. When I read this book on Joe McCarthy, that was a big turning point in my life. I mean, obviously, I knew about Joe McCarthy, but this book, A Conspiracy So Immense, goes into just everything he did, the evil that he was, and I recommend this book highly. His Roy Cohn, his lawyer was Trump's lawyer for many years. So they have the same lawyer who taught them the same tactics of hate and aggression and lies, and just come out first, attacking with nonstop lies. And so again, around the country, look at this poor beleaguered gentleman here having to listen to this. And so this is happening today. They're hunting people down with ICE today. They're hunting people down on the left all over this country today. And so we have to aggressively push back against all of this. We also brought in, under Operation Paperclip, we brought in Nazis to begin our space program. I'm here in Los Angeles, and basically they were, we could have changed our economy after World War II. We could have transitioned into a peacetime economy, but the weapons manufacturers in Los Angeles all were terrified. They'd lose their gravy train from the tax windfall of World War II for them. And so they went to Congress and they begged and they said the LA economy will crumble if we shut down these weapons manufacturers. So the Cold War was an economic invention, also the US Cold War. Again, we have, of course, the racism of Edgar Hoover and the FBI, and all the damage that they did in the name of seeking out communists and hunting down communists. There's something very, very racist, again, about anti-communism, because just the idea of people being equal is anathema to anti-communists. And so we have anti-communists running. I think it's a little more helpful today, instead of calling people fascists in our government, to call them anti-communists, because that's the opposite end of that. And to be, not everyone who is a fascist or anti-fascist is a communist, but all communists are anti-fascists. And so I'll get to something else in just a minute, where I'm talking about this race baiting and anti-communism. Of course, they called Martin Luther King a communist. And so now today you say, oh, but now we all understand. If you think Martin Luther King Day is really, really watered down politically. In Los Angeles, do you know who runs the Martin Luther King parade? The cops. So the cops are the one in Redondo Beach. They're the ones that organize and run the Martin Luther King Day parade. It's ridiculous. So when I do Martin Luther King, we with my students or with organizing. We do it in April on the day of his murder. So we try and bring the politics a little bit back more into this. And again, this is a very good book called Labor's Untold Story. And you'll find on the footnote of page 15 that anti-communism doesn't just go back 75 years from the end of the World War II. It doesn't go back 100 years to the Russian Revolution. It goes back 150 years in the United States. People who were pro-slavery were calling abolitionists communist because the Communist Manifesto had been published just a couple years before in the late 40s, 1840s, and within just a couple of years, abolitionists were being red baited as communists. Here's my nemesis. A lot of people who lived through the Vietnam era, that was their youth. For them, Nixon just makes their skin crawl. And for me, Reagan, that's the person who makes my skin crawl. He was the president of my youth and definitely got me radicalized and in the Latin American solidarity movement. And what do we see today? What was communism? It was people trying to have land. It was people trying to have an education. It was people trying to have a say in their society. It was people trying to have people be equal in their society. And we can say today that that's what, a common American wants and believes. And yet at that time in these other countries, because of the overarching U.S. Cold War, Americans were terrified and bamboozled and steamrolled into it. People say that there wasn't a lot of protests in the 80s. There were a lot of protests. There was the anti-nuclear protest. I did some speeches on that in high school. There was definitely the protests against the wars against Central America. And, people for a long time have been saying, what is where's the anti-war movement? Where's the anti-war movement? And for me, because I've been in Latin America Solidarity for over 40 years, my entire adult life, the Latin America Solidarity movement to me has been the anti-war movement across this country. It's deep and it's wide and it's profound, and it's very seeped in faith. And there's a big allyship that can happen between all of the faiths of good conscience and the people. Here we have Blaise Bonpane speaking of with the 4 nuns behind him, a picture of the 4 nuns who were murdered in El Salvador, raped and tortured and murdered in El Salvador. And this was this and the murder of the 6 Jesuit priests in El Salvador and their housekeeper and daughter was the thing that got me into civil disobedience at the age of about 21. We would go to the federal building in Los Angeles, and we called ourselves the Wednesday Morning Coalition, and we would shut it down. We would chain ourselves to the doors, and we did that over and over and over again on Wednesdays to draw attention to the U.S. War against El Salvador. And then Guatemala, our genocide. Guatemala is literally a United Nations declared genocide. We overthrew their elected president, Jacobo Arbenz, in 1954. And he was, democratically elected. And since then, there was the Civil War. And then, especially in the early 1980s with Reagan, the genocidal war of the Mayas, and between 200, 300, is everyone muted? Can you mute? Thank you. 200 to 300,000 Mayas mostly Mayas were murdered in that genocide. And I think it's very important to keep using the word genocide because I'm a high school teacher. And when you teach anything about history, you cannot be teaching about Palestine right now. The only genocide apparently where you're allowed to talk about is the genocide against Jews. And I think it's very important that other genocides be brought up and be taught. So I'm a Spanish teacher, and I definitely teach the Guatemalan, the U.S. Genocide against Guatemalans. And so this is at the School of the Americas protest at the border, which is a beautiful other anti-imperialist movement that started. And maybe some of you have been, and I would love to hear from you about that. Beautiful, beautiful people. And leads me back to Cuba. And if you don't have this book, it's very short. It's a speech of Fidel's that he gave in 1992 in Rio de Janeiro at the First Earth Summit. And the book is called Tomorrow is Too Late. And it's about the environmental crisis. And that if he basically predicted the predicament that we would be in today, and it basically said, if we don't get our act together and start speaking the truth and come together as a world community, he said, the world will become ungovernable. That's a kind of a scary thought. The world will become ungovernable. And we are, fast approaching that, both politically, but also the ability to manage our environmental needs upon which we live. So basically, to me, the Cold War has been, and why I just reject it and I see it for what it is, the Cold War has been a battle between development models, and the development model of greed, the development model of hierarchy, the development model of exploitation of the planet. People could say, "Oh, Soviet Union, polluted." Also, I'm not playing that kind of bipolar game. I'm just saying what the development model needs to be, and that the United States was, and the purpose of the Cold War was to shove capitalism down the throat of the entire world. And, a lot of people think that the Cold War ended in 1991. Oh, the Cold War ended, we won. Well, first of all, the Cold War was never cold and it never ended. Just ask all the countries like Cuba and Venezuela and everywhere that it ended. No, it did not. But, also it was never cold. And if, let's say it did end, how's that working for the world? If we won, how's that turning out? We're worse off than we ever were. So maybe we shouldn't have won. And this is a great painting by Francisco de Goya. And it says, "El sueño de la razón produce monstruos." The sleep of reason produces monsters. That the Cold War has been fanatically religious in nature. This is Reagan bringing in the right-wing Bible thumpers into the White House. And so, today when we have Christian nationalists running the show, we have got to, point the finger where it lays at Reagan also, and tear off the Teflon. As a matter of fact, last Friday was February 6th, and that's our 7th annual Renounce Reagan Day. And what we do, what we do is I'm looking for it in my files. What we do is we take these signs that say, "I renounce Reagan," for, and you put your reason for, and you take a picture and a selfie and you post it around. It's just very, very important that his name keep coming up, because he really changed the economic and the political, and I would say psychological structure of this country. My mom, I remember always saying, she said, Reagan changed the culture of this country. He made it okay to be selfish. And so we produce monsters. And for decades and decades, we produced the monsters of our war machine, and they're now running amok on our tax dollars all over this country. And it's in entertainment, it's in education. My school, I cringe every time they make the announcement about the Boeing internship for juniors. Come sign up for the summer Boeing internship. And I'm, you know. And so there's a lot of blowback to our country from the US Cold War. This was a horrible day in our lives, of course. But of course, we all remember the Chilean coup in 1973, the US coup that was also September 11th. And luckily, I teach that in my Spanish class at the very beginning. But I consider 9/11 to be blowback from our Cold War. And let me take you on that little journey. So 9/11 was blowback for us putting military bases in Saudi Arabia. And the reason we were putting military bases in Saudi Arabia was because of our first war, Gulf War, against Saddam Hussein. And of course, you see the picture here with Donald Rumsfeld. In the 80s, Saddam Hussein was our ally, and then he became our enemy. And so we began a war against him and I might say that you should go back to see in 1991 how Cuba and other countries, but Cuba in particular, was screaming at us not to do this and screaming actually at Saddam Hussein, do not invade Kuwait, you will get it. And, all of this could have been avoided. So how is that Cold War, though? Why were we supporting Saddam Hussein? We were supporting Saddam Hussein in this kind of a war because of what we had done to Iran. So we were supporting Iraq so that they would kill Iranians. And I cannot believe that anyone of any credentials would ever talk about Iranian US relations and started at 1979. It was several years ago, I saw a piece in the Atlantic and it said, what are the roots of US Iranian tensions? And I thought, oh, great, we're going to get to the bottom of this. And I skimmed the entire article and it started in 1979. I was incensed. We cooed their country, their first elected president, who actually loved America at the time. We totally betrayed him and cooed him along with England to take their oil and make enemies out of basically the Middle East. If you think about it, and Donald Trump he's awful, but he's just kind of the cherry on top of decades and decades of US militarism and lies and imperialism. He is really the cherry on top. He takes the cake. But we had to make Americans hate the Middle East, hate Muslims, hate Persians, hate Arabs, so that we could get oil on our terms. And again, do you see how, I'm an environmental engineer, so I come from that perspective, that mindset always. And so oil is at the basis of all of this. Without this, we don't run any of these shows. That's why Cuba must be saved, and Cuba is such a model still, even the difficulty they're going under, because they're going to figure a lot of this out. And they've already done it once with the fall of the Soviet Union during their special period, and they're going to figure it out, and we're going to help them get through it. But this coup, as well as the creation of Israel and the way it was done with the Nakba, really set the stage for major American hatred and fear of the Middle East. Hatred and fear of Russia, you know, and I'm not sure everyone on this call even will agree with where I'm coming from this. And unfortunately, this war helped split the peace movement, which was not an accident, but the facts are that the Warsaw Pact was begun 5 years after NATO was formed. So the United States has been occupying militarily all of Europe ever since World War II, and we've never gotten out of there. It's an occupation. And we created NATO, and the Warsaw Pact was defensive against it. And after the Soviet Union broke up and allowed Eastern and Western Germany to reunite, I mean, Germany, the country that had killed 20 million of them, they allowed them to reunite because we promised that NATO would not move 1 inch closer to the east. And yet, look at the trajectory, and it really picks up with Clinton. The Clinton years was the first to expand NATO after the breakup. And and this is an old map. This is the good old days. And they pushed and pushed and pushed, and then we helped coup the president, who he wasn't pro-Russia, he wasn't pro-West, he was neutral. Remember the non-aligned movement? You're not allowed to be neutral in totalitarian capitalism. You definitely have to pick a side. So Russia invaded, and those of us in the peace community who saw this coming were absolutely against the invasion, and it's been a travesty. But we also see what led up to it, and so we want we want the abolishment of NATO and the demilitarization of Europe, including Russia. And I think that they would go for that. But that means getting all US bases out of Europe too. Because they asked to be in NATO, and we laughed. And so this is very important also. And those of us in the West, well, in Los Angeles, we have the USS Iowa right here, the giant battleship that's also a Cold War ship besides fighting fascism. But we go down there every year, and we show this map of the U.S. surrounding China. And we say, and Code Pink has a big campaign, China's not our enemy, that that if China had any military like this around the United States, what would we do? We'd be bombing them to smithereens right now. So we are the aggressors. We are the imperialists, and the rest of this is pretty defensive against us. I would even say, and I'm just thought to say it, but if you look at a map of with Hawaii in the middle and the United States to one side and Japan to the other, I could see why Japan would want to defend. We had a giant Navy base halfway to Japan, so we're definitely insiders, and again to spread global capitalism. And again, great, if capitalism is the model that's going to work with the world, let's spread it. But it's not the model, so we cannot spread it, and we use our military to spread capitalism and Christianity, which brings me back to Unitarians and maybe a campaign someone's interested in doing with me. But, we Unitarians have come out officially against the doctrine of discovery, which is the 500-year-old Christian, Catholic, whatever, Bible-based decree that says that Christians are allowed to take over the world. Right. So our religion, then God was like, I don't think so. So we formally came out against it. And I would like to push for a campaign that Unitarians through the UUA come out formally against the Monroe Doctrine. So if someone wants to work with me on that, that'd be awesome. And I'm getting towards the end of my slideshow. So what do we do? What do we do about all this? What are we doing here in Los Angeles and San Pedro? Here's our USS Iowa. We go down we go down all the time, but especially during Fleet Week, we take it on and we do Peace Week. It's a Memorial Day. They turn this giant parking lot into a military fairgrounds. It's abominable. This is in front of Nanette Berrigan's office, and this is, unfortunately, this woman by my side has passed of lung cancer. Her name was Beverly. She was wonderful. But we need to get to our congressional offices and stop taking no for an answer. If anyone's in Nanette's district or would want to come with me, but we need to be going to their offices and demanding a change in our military policy, in our militarism, and that for them to speak the truth. We go to so these are ideas for those of you on the call of where you have these things in your community, because a lot of people know that we have 800 U.S. military bases around the world, but we have 5,400 plus military bases in the United States. We have 5,400 military installations of some sort or another all over. So we are an occupied country by our own military. I have heard some military people talk about our resistance, and it is frightening the way they talk. It's as if I'm not even a fellow American. They just kind of, they say, just try and stop us on our own land. It's pretty frightening. So let's recruit for peace, not for war. Let's be as bold as we can. Just a sliver of Paul Robeson's boldness by taking on, the Cold War at the time that he did. I mean, we were their allies, and then all of a sudden you were a devil if you had anything to do with the Soviet Union. So he took them on and he challenged them. Like people, I'm very proud to hear, the last couple of days they're taking on, what's that Barbie bimbo with Pam Bondi, Pam Barbie. They're taking her on. That's what we need to do unequivocally. Find all of the World War II memorabilia around in your town and declare them Antifa, because that's what we do. We go around, we do an anti-fascist tour, and we claim all of the World War II monuments and things to be Antifa. And let's start looking in our communities and rewriting the story and reclaiming, the anti-fascist history of this country. Recently, we went to against the U.S. war against Venezuela. And this was before, and that we attacked them, killed 200 people within 30 minutes, and kidnapped their president and first lady and put them in a prison in New York. We have sanctions against over half of the world. If you include China, we have sanctions over half of the people of the whole world. Sanctions are economic warfare, and they lead to incredible destruction and death and hunger and pain and total societal disruption in those countries. And we don't even know, and we don't even care, and we don't even get to vote on that. People, you have people like Indivisible, right? And, good group, and they're coming along, and a lot of us are pushing them along. It's not just no kings, it's no empire, right? But they're talking about democracy, democracy. Our U.S. foreign policy is the most undemocratic thing about the United States. There's never been democracy in U.S. foreign policy. As a matter of fact, Fidel, and I'll leave you with some positive or some hope from Fidel. He said that he didn't believe that the U.S. could ever become truly fascist. He said, because there's too much of this, there's too much horizontal organizing, there's too much there's too much crazy pushback. He said, but your foreign policy is already fascist. So we have to come to terms with that and keep pushing for it to be in all our political discourse. Because if it's not, it leads to things like this, which is the caravans that came from Central America. And the caravans happened because of our US wars against Central America. The first caravan was Honduran children. And that came from the 2009 Hillary Clinton supported, Barack Obama supported coup against a progressive president in Honduras. So again, that Cold War, we cannot allow democracy to happen abroad if they elect the wrong people. And all he wanted and all he was doing was having farmers have land, single mothers have some help, kids have education, sick people have health care. That's all it is. It's not magic. It's not a boogeyman. That's all it is. And my one hope is that the worse that things get here, and this is something I'm sensing, the worse the objective conditions get here in the United States, the more Americans are finally starting to open their ears and maybe see that what we've been doing abroad all these years wasn't to stop any boogeyman. It was to stop it and to crush any model of anything different so that we couldn't have it here. I consider the Americans to be some of the most oppressed people in the world. We're not allowed to know what there is out there. And yet we're really good people and we're really inventive people and creative people. And when liberated, we're gonna help save this world. So when we had these caravans, guess who could exploit them? Donald Trump. And now ICE, and I'm a member of Harbor Area Peace Patrols, and please, if you're in your community, become a member of one of your rapid response or community networks that help immigrants in your community. But, when we try and help community immigrants in our communities, I understand them as refugees, many of them as refugees from US foreign policy. And I don't have a slide for it, but we talk about US wars against Central America. But one of these huge policies that has created a lot of dislocation and forced migration into this country has been NAFTA. Bill Clinton's NAFTA. 1994, we started to build a wall. The wall began with Clinton, and we started to build a wall because of our globalization of the economy and weakening of the Mexican economy caused 1 million Mexicans to lose their land, and they had to come here. And now we're crushing them, terrorizing them with ICE, along with Central Americans and people from many other parts of the world, but it's mainly Latinos. And it gets us in this pie chart is the good old days. This is a few years old, so this blue is probably even bigger, and now includes tens of billions of dollars for ICE. So what does this leave us? Cuba, this is a really great document that's in their Museum of the Revolution. In 1959, Cuba had a huge change in their society that they needed in their country. And my dad always said, and this goes back to how I came to question the Cold War, my dad always said that we should have thrown Fidel a ticker tape parade down 42nd Avenue in New York. And instead, what we did was we, pushed him into, and Fidel has said that, Cuba didn't cause the Cold War. Cuba didn't bring the Cold War to Cuba. The United States brought the Cold War to Cuba. That's not what they were doing. they were part of a very big part of the non-aligned movement. But these were changes that they needed. And they needed agrarian reform. They needed the lowering of rents. They need the promotion of their culture. They needed small industrialization. They needed all of these. They needed to stop the casinos, which I'm telling you, if you think, it's just horrific things that they want to do to Gaza, the development that they want to do there, which they will not. They're going to bring back those casinos in Cuba, or they're slathering over the desire to, and they will not. So, Cuba will win, and we will win with them, because we need a huge change in this country. We cannot allow the indivisibles or anyone to say just vote blue no matter who, and let's just go back. We need a huge change. We need to start solving these problems, and let them call us communists, let them call us socialists. If having wanting jobs, wanting decent wages, wanting a home, healthcare, wanting peace in the world, if that's communist, then what's an anti-communist? What are their values? So don't be afraid to be red baited. Here's another solution, big solution, and this is land reform. This is our home. We call it Harbor Farms. And when we first bought this place, we just started planting food. And you can't see the logo below, or the motto, but it says, trust the sun, grow food. The sun is our ultimate energy source. And that's a whole other slideshow, but urban agriculture, respect and love between rural and urban America is a huge answer in all of this. Localizing our economies. Code Pink has something called one of their campaigns is the local peace economy, and we need to really relocalize our economy. And again, if whoever put the links in the chat before, and with this I end. If you could put the chats again, one is to donate to Code Pink, or to look it up and find the campaign that's taking direct, immediate food aid right now to Cuba. The other link is my book here that you can get. It's quite wonderful, and it's actually an easy read because all the testimonies were about 10 minutes, and so they're about 3 or 4 pages long. And then let's see what other link. Super important. Freedom. Freedom to have culture. Freedom to rewrite the militarist story. We need to bring music back. We need to bring community back, and completely rewrite this Cold War story. And we can. Thank you so much.
Rachel, that was so brilliant, so fantastic, so wide-ranging, starting with your father, going through decade after decade of our history, some of it forgotten, especially in view of what we're all enduring right now. I'm sure that folks are going to have a lot of questions for you, but I thought I might ask you something before I open it up to questioning. We see Trump now being absolutely determined to go in and take Cuba out. How do you see that playing out? Do you see him being successful in that? And why is it so critically important to take that little tiny country out? Can you just tie your talk together with that?
Yeah, well, Cuba has been building international solidarity for 66 years. So that I see right now, and we can already see on the ground there. And again, I mentioned at the top of the hour that there is a flotilla just like the Gaza flotilla. There's a flotilla going to Cuba right now with food aid. Nicaragua has been helping with food aid. Mexico has been helping with food aid. There are just many countries that are going and helping in solidarity with Cuba, because Cuba has been in solidarity with the world for their entire revolution. So it's very, very important for us. So first of all, they will not have, and Fidel, I keep quoting him because he knew everything. But Fidel said, there's going to be a revolution in the United States before there's a counter revolution in Cuba. So it will not come internally. And it's tough to think. I can't even imagine violence of a military sort against Cuba. But I don't see that playing out. I can't predict. I'm not here to do that. But we're going to fight like hell, and there are already caravans starting around the country in solidarity with Cuba. And so I think the better question is, how do we jump on that and start educating Americans and getting them on board?
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. We've got a hand raised. Brian, would you like to ask a question or make a comment?
Yes, I live in a suburb of Dallas, Texas. In 2016, the state sponsored a trade mission to Cuba, and the intent was to sell agricultural products from Texas. But nothing ever came of that. I was wondering, what insight do you have about how Vietnam and Cuba, what's the same, what's the difference? How is it that Vietnam and the United States have been able to normalize relations, but Cuba has not?
Mm. Probably the pressure and the heartache and the triumph over the moral injury of tens of thousands of Vietnam veterans. They are really the lobbying force that has allowed America to stop such intense cruelty against Vietnam. So they were a very strong voice, Veterans for Peace, a lot of all the veteran groups that go to Vietnam allowed us to open up with them again. Also, I would say I just think it's a matter of proximity too. Cuba's 90 miles away, and many of us have seen Cuba, and we know, and so we're spreading the word here. And so I think that really they are kind of seen as a ideological threat because they are so close. And I've always said, with Cuba, you don't see a wall. And Americans and Vietnamese are very different people, right? But you go to Cuba and there's a lot of similarities, and we have so much history together. And so you don't see a wall when you go and meet Cubans. You see a mirror. And I really think that is what the purpose of the blockade is to keep Americans and Cubans separate. Yeah, thank you.
Interesting, powerful. Moji, you have your hand raised.
Yes, hi. When I came into the room, I saw Dr. Mossadegh, and the picture that you showed about the 1953 coup. I'm from Iran, and I'm the founder of the Mossadegh Legacy Institute.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I am an associate member of Veterans for Peace, as well as the founder of Peace-Seeking Iranian Veterans. And Dr. Mossadegh was a spiritual forefather of the non-aligned movement. And I gave a talk on neither East nor West to a panel organized by Women Against NATO a couple of weeks ago. And so my question, if you will, comment, question, whatever, is that I believe the Cold War was in part manufactured into a chronic conflict because, first of all, as George Orwell said in 1948, the big brother needs to have an enemy. So there was an enemy that was manufactured, as Noam Chomsky talks about manufacturing consent. And then it became a conflict for which the Soviet Union and its military-industrial complex became a beneficiary of the conflict in the Cold War. So one example is when Kennedy and Khrushchev got scared of after the Cuban Missile Crisis, they wanted to kind of bring down the flames of the Cold War. In this country, Kennedy was killed by the military-industrial complex that overthrew Dr. Mossadegh in 1953. And within 3 months, Rachel, the coup against Khrushchev began in the Soviet Union. And then Leonid Brezhnev took on, and he benefited from the from the Cold War. So comment on what I just said about the ideological collaboration as enemy of forces that don't like peace and normal relationship between peoples of different countries. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'm really honored to have you here, and just so great that the work you're doing. It's very, very important work, and anything I can do to be present at any other work you do, I would really like to be. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I did say that one of the people who spoke at our Cold War Truth Commission, as a matter of fact, it might have been one of the last things he ever did, was Daniel Ellsberg. And he makes exactly your point that the Cold War literally was manufactured, and manufactured a lot by Los Angeles, the aerospace industry. And it was invented, and we had to invent an enemy in order to keep the economy running. And here's the maybe good news of it is we've run out of almost enemies in the world. The true enemy is going to be the weather. And so there's, people say that our economy and capitalism and the way we're going is unsustainable. And in a way, that's good news, because what unsustainable, the definition of unsustainable means it cannot last. And so the way we're doing it now cannot last. We cannot continue to manufacture enemies because the objective conditions are changing. And so, again, it's a really good piece in here about that. And also, I don't know, and I'll put her name in the chat, because if you don't know her, sir, but Nuri Ranagi, she's big in the Iranian solidarity community too, and her story's in here too. She and her family had to flee after the 1953 coup against Iran. And I just want to say, a lot of people are putting in the chat, of course, the difference also about Cuba is the Florida lobby. And I would just say something about that, is that a lot of people think this is my take on it, but they say that Miami, which is a cesspool, I mean, all the Latin American terrorists and escapees live there. It's disgusting. But Miami does not control Washington, D.C. Oh, it's the Cuban lobby is controlling what we do. No. Washington, D.C. is the head of the snake, and it has been bedfellows, with the first fascists that ruled Cuba before the revolution, but definitely it has. And I would say, with all the kind of rancor that I feel for the gusanos, the Cuban Americans, I also have a lot of pity for them. If you go and you see old people in Miami, old Cuban Americans, they are bitter people, they are hateful people, they're washed up people. And violent and doing violence against another country from our shores. That's like terrorism. But they have been twisted. What has happened to their lives is really a product of the U.S. Cold War, of Washington, D.C. I feel similarly about that as I do about American Jews who support Israel. I find it tragic because it didn't have to be that way, and that our U.S. Cold War and our need to control the Middle East for the oil and the has just really been a tragedy for American Jews, so who have been
Rachel,
warped by our Cold War.
thank you for your response. I just want to very quickly say that one of the legacies of Dr. Mossadegh that I talk about in my lectures and presentations is he said internal despotism and external colonialism are two sides of the same coin, especially now that they need each other between Iran and Israel. The two regimes need one another as enemy. And so this project, National Peace and Democracy Coalition of Iran, that the link of which I put in the chat, is based on Mossadegh's non-alignment, neither east nor west legacy. In other words, we don't need to become a lackey of imperialism in order to, because we are fighting, whatever. We don't have to play into that violent game.
Yeah.
So I would love to talk to you if you're interested.
Yeah. And just kind of one thing on that is to, let's get into solution and be hopeful. If colonialism abroad, is despotism at home, also peace abroad leads to more democracy at home. So I think we can make that connection too, and start to, push the anti-war movement with that. Being anti-war and creating more peace abroad and getting out of everybody's business is going to create more democracy at home. If you want democracy at home and you're freaked out by all this, then stop going to war everywhere.
Thank you, Moji. Thank you, Rachel. We do have another hand raised over here. Pamela, would you like to ask a question or comment?
Thank you. I missed most of your presentation. I'm hoping I can maybe, if it was recorded, see it.
Yeah, it's recorded. You can see it online shortly, Pamela.
Great. But I wanted to point out that when you say we're running out of enemies, I think the fossil fuel industry is creating them, and that we're doing to Venezuela what we did to Cuba, and what we did to Iran in the middle of the last century, when we deposed the socialist democratically elected leader and installed strongman the Shah.
Excuse me, Dr. Mossadegh was a social democrat. He wasn't a socialist.
Fine, yes.
The
a good guy.
Is that he was a
guy. A good guy.
Right.
Well, aren't social democrats socialist? I'm not talking about Marxist. I'm talking about...
Except the justification for the overthrow of his government was that he was a communist.
Thank you, Moji. Let's let her finish her comments, okay?
And that Maduro also, Cesar Chavez was a very, very popular populist democratic socialist leader that we demonized, conflating socialism with communism, and conflating communism with totalitarianism, which how do we get the mainstream to recognize that who they think are the evil villains, like Castro and Chavez, Maduro, the guy that was in Iran that we overthrew, even overthrowing Gaddafi.
Yes. So I'm going to answer your question. So watch the whole, because that's basically was my entire talk. So it's that the Cold War was a lie, and that the purpose was to lie, and the mess of it all. The mission statement that's in the book, and that's part of the project that I've been putting on for 10 years, is that we consider the Cold War to be the third and as of yet unrecognized crime of American history, after the genocide of the Native American population and the kidnapping and enslavement of Africans. As huge as those are, I consider the U.S. Cold War of the last 100 years to be that big, that damaging, that epic of a horror story. And so I don't play the game either, because I love Cuba and I love Cubans. And guess what? They're full of communists, and they're the greatest people I've ever met. So the big lie is to say, oh, I don't play the game of, oh, I'm just a socialist, I'm not a communist, or I'm a social democrat, I'm not even a socialist. I don't play that game. I said early on in the talk, we all have fascism inside of us. We all have hate, we all have violence, we all have racism, like all that apartness. And we all have
nature, we're tribal.
Exactly. But we're also communist.
Well, tribal. Yeah.
Okay, I'll can answer this. Thanks. So communist, communal, all of that with little c, not big C. But the whole thing doesn't matter, because in the end, and I've shared in my talk, it's the development model. How are we going to move forward? How are we going to keep getting water? How are we going to keep getting food? How are we going to keep getting housing? And speaking of housing, and thank you for bringing up Venezuela, and you're exactly right. We lied about Chavez and we lied about Maduro. Go back to, and this is something I share with my students, go back to April 2nd, 2014. Venezuela, A Call for Peace by Nicolas Maduro. It was published in the New York Times, and it was his letter, his plea in 2014 after Hugo Chavez mysteriously died, to leave Venezuela alone. He says, all we want is to help our poor people, all we want. And he's pleading with us, please don't do this. And within the last 10, 15 years, Venezuela has built 4 million homes for their workers and basically kind of given them to workers. And so guess who's frothing at the mouth right now to get their hands on those homes, those apartments? The real estate industry in Venezuela. So, they built homes and we have homeless, and they're building homes. And what a fascinating model. In Cuba in 1960, 61, they basically gave everybody one piece of paper. They said, wherever you live, you now own it. And you just have to pay 10% of your salary for the next 20 years and you'll own it outright. But rest assured, you own where you live. And when you go to Cuba, there's not that sense. I mean, there's a lot of problems with housing, and you can't even take Cuba's problems out from the blockade and what we've done, but you don't have that sense that people are worried about not having a roof over their head. I mean, what a dream. How fascinating to Americans. So there's all these models that we've never been allowed to see, that, I mean, don't even get me started on the environmental model of Cuba. And Lucy, thank you. I'll stop with this and take your question. But in about the mid 2000s, World Wildlife Fund not a communist organization, did a study of all the countries in the world. And their study was, what countries in the world are people okay in? Their Human Development Index, the HDI, birth rate, life expectancy, childbirth mortality, infant mortality, education level. What countries around the world, people are doing okay in their development? And what countries, however, they have a low carbon footprint. So your humans are doing okay, but you're not trashing the planet. And they overlaid that data, and there was only one country in the world where the people were doing fine and they weren't trashing the planet, i.e. sustainable. And that was Cuba. And so I wrote a piece at that time that said, Cuba's alternative to war is sustainable development. And again, the worse we get off and the worse our objective conditions, we're going to have to start listening. So we save Cuba to save ourselves.
Lucy, I guess the floor is yours.
Thank you. This is great. Thank you. You're talking about culture change and worldview change needed. Cuba is a great example. How do we get a mindset like Cuba from where we are now? And you mentioned localization and working locally as a good place to work on this. And I'd love to hear you say more about how we can do that in our, our bioregions where we live. Thank you.
I'd say the way to be more like Cuba is to be completely American. And just claim our seat, claim our, and just do what we have to do. My dad always said, and again, I keep quoting my dad, because he gave me a lot of my politics, my understanding, but he said, take no prisoners. So again, don't throw communists under the bus and say, oh, I'm not a communist. You just threw Cuba under the bus. You just threw the model under the bus, the mothership, so, I mean, this is a huge conversation, but I would say definitely talk about bioregion and reach out. A lot of people I organize with just, I can't do indivisible. I can, because, just kind of reach people where they are and then grab them and bring them to where you are and share and just keep. Fidel always said, when we're organizing, we must add, never subtract. Don't say, no, and push away. We just keep adding and adding and adding people and being super creative about it, super individual, whatever your individual strength. I fell in love with plants, and so I grow food. That's my individual thing. Other people are great at music. Get out there and do it with a revolutionary fervor to save the world. One of the most beautiful, and those, it's just, God bless Cuba. But one of the most beautiful billboards I ever saw there was Fidel. God, these are long stories. I need to start talking about Cuba again. He was going down to Panama in the early 2000s for a regional summit, and all this stuff had happened, long story, but the billboards had a big earth and it had a hand and it said, like, Fidel's going to Panama para salvar al mundo, to save the world. That's how these people think. This little tiny island is saving the world. And when I started to go there in 2000, and it was, recently after, there's only one superpower and Soviet Union is no longer superpower. I go, no, there's two superpowers in the world. So the United States and Cuba, tiny little island, superpower. Yeah, so we have to do things with revolutionary fervor here.
Thank you.
Rachel, thank you for coming. It's just been wonderful to have you. We wouldn't be able to do these shows if it wasn't for our co-chairs, Sally Sally, who's her picture's not up, and Terry. And so thank you, both of you, for making it possible for us to get the tech and everything covered. And thank all of you who came, because it's not worth doing unless you're here. And I really appreciate it. And that we're really down to the last minute. If anybody had any real quick question, we could do it. Otherwise, I think it's or if you'd like to put your address or email, or I mean, just tell us where you are, your email in the chat, that would be nice. But I think we're right down to the last minute, unless anybody else has another quick question or quick comment.
Just circling around to the beginning, discussing some of the Ronald Reagan era and the problems here at home. I recommend the book Democracy in Chains by Nancy MacLean, who talks a lot about the conservative efforts to destroy democracy in this country.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Rachel. And this will be up online. You can share it with your friends. And I'm just very appreciative.
Thank you. And I just want to say that I'm available. We're kind of in person. We do these Cold War Truth Commissions, or online, other spaces. I'd love to keep organizing with you all.
Cool. Wonderful. Thank you. I guess, Terry, you can cut it.